Jerusalem, 33 AD. The dust had barely settled on the Mount of Olives. Following the ascension of Jesus, his disciples scattered across every road, embarking on a mission that would change the world forever. Yet, amidst the blazing fervor of this new era, a strange silence lingered. Mary, the mother of the Savior, the most iconic woman in human history, suddenly recedes into the shadows of the ancient texts. She was the one who cradled him from his very first breath in Bethlehem, and she was the one who stood unbroken at the foot of the cross, catching the final tears shed upon the hill of Golgotha. And yet, immediately after the first chapter of the Acts of the Apostles, her name all but vanishes. There are no eloquent sermons, no epistles sent to the early churches bear her name. Why did the greatest witness of all abruptly fade from behind the gates of the Gospels? Many mistakenly believe this silence marked the end, that she simply faded into oblivion. But in truth, it was a beautiful act of transition and a glorious withdrawal. She knew when to step back and make way for the next generation, for leaders like Peter and Paul. She proved that true influence doesn't have to be loud or outwardly proclaimed. It can radiate as a quiet, steady light, shaping everything from within. Mary did not disappear. She simply chose a different role, one of quiet but profound power behind the scenes. Most of us completely miss the final 30 years of her life, a time that holds the secrets of how the early church survived. In this video, we will follow rare archaeological footprints from Jerusalem to modern-day Turkey in search of answers. Stick around, because halfway through, I will reveal exactly how a physician like Luke was able to record Mary's most intimate, closely guarded secrets. Don't miss a single minute, because this journey will forever change the way you view your own life's purpose. Let us return to that most agonizing and poignant moment on Golgotha. Amidst his final, labored breaths, Jesus did something that transcended ordinary maternal love. Looking down at Mary and his beloved disciple John, he spoke the words, "Woman, behold your son. Behold your mother." This was far more than a deeply moving final wish. It was a vital act of protection. In first-century Judean society, a widow without a biological son to provide for her would be instantly pushed to the brink of ruin, left highly vulnerable to absolute poverty and exploitation. By entrusting Mary to John, Jesus forged a profound new concept: a chosen family. A bond forged not by bloodline, but by divine love and shared responsibility. Living under the same roof, the two struck a beautiful, divine balance. It was a merging of John's fiery zeal, the man once named a son of thunder, and the quiet, contemplative grace of a mother who had endured the absolute depths of human sorrow. Picture those quiet, still evenings in Jerusalem. In the flickering glow of an oil lamp, long after their humble meals had ended, stories that the world had never heard began to unfold. Mary opened her heart, sharing with her adopted son the hidden years in Nazareth. She spoke of the sound of wood shavings falling in the small carpenter's shop and the cherished childhood memories of the Savior. These were exclusive fragments of history that no other apostle ever had the privilege to witness. And it was right there, in that small, humble home where they found refuge in one another, that the foundation for the greatest chapters of our faith began to take shape. Have you ever wondered why the Gospels offer such vastly different perspectives? While most of the disciples focused their writings on the grand miracles and the turbulent years of public ministry, the Gospels of Luke and John contain moments that are quiet, profound, and deeply personal. How could Luke, a Gentile physician and a convert who was nowhere near Bethlehem on the night of the Nativity, describe in such vivid detail a newborn wrapped in swaddling clothes and laid in a manger? How did he gain such intimate insight into the private soul of a young mother, the woman who treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart? The answer is clear. The only living source for those beautiful passages was Mary herself. She never picked up a pen to write a single line of dogma. She left behind no parchment scrolls or handwritten letters for posterity. And yet, she was the silent architect who shaped the New Testament. Through the oral tradition, the authentic and vibrant art of storytelling, Mary authored history using nothing but her own memories. Her presence during this era confirms an invaluable truth. The role of a woman is not confined to nurturing alone. Women are the guardians and keepers of the flame, preserving faith and culture for all generations to come. Without the stories Mary meticulously shared during those hidden years, perhaps half the beauty of the Savior's humanity would have been lost forever to the shadows of history. The fragile peace beneath John's roof was not to last. Before long, the dark clouds of brutal persecution began to gather, casting a heavy shadow over the streets of Jerusalem. The early community of believers suddenly found themselves in the heart of a violent storm. Fury erupted with the death of Stephen, the first martyr, stoned without mercy. Soon after, the cold blade of the sword claimed the life of James. Once again, Mary's old wounds were torn wide open. She had watched her own son endure the agony of the cross, and now she was forced to witness her children of faith, the very disciples she had nurtured and protected, being hunted and struck down. When the world collapses and danger closes in, the human instinct is often to panic or retreat into despair. But Mary revealed a resilience that was nothing short of extraordinary. She refused to let adversity break her spirit. Standing in the center of the storm, her unshakable calm and ironclad faith became a steady anchor, holding a trembling community together. Yet, as the waves of persecution intensified, Mary did not choose to hide in fear. Instead, she chose a far more daring path, a perilous journey across the sea to a foreign land. Have you ever wondered how an elderly woman could survive and even thrive in a center of pagan worship like Ephesus? In a moment, we will step inside her secret sanctuary on Nightingale Mountain. And be sure to stay until the very end, because I will share a profound lesson on finding rest that can bring you absolute peace, even in our own chaotic and uncertain world. Leaving Jerusalem was never a light decision, least of all when it meant forsaking the very ground that bore the footprints of Jesus. The journey from the Holy Land to Ephesus, a trek spanning some 600 to 800 miles, was a brutal ordeal, one that would have exhausted the strength of even the most vigorous young men of that age. We must remember that travel in the first century was fraught with peril and hardship. Mary and John were forced to toil along dusty Roman roads under a scorching, relentless sun, and to gamble their lives on fragile sailing vessels tossed by the unpredictable and violent waves of the Mediterranean. This was no voyage of leisure to discover a new world. This was a true exodus of faith. They were cradling the seeds of a nascent religion, fleeing the reach of ruthless blades and systemic persecution. Behind every weary step lay the weight of ultimate sacrifice. To sever ties with one's homeland and leave behind the site of your most sacred memories required a supernatural strength of will. Yet, for the survival of the mission and to protect the newly kindled flame of faith, Mary was willing to step into the unknown. She accepted the cost of her own safety, choosing instead the life of a resilient sojourner in a strange and foreign land. Why Ephesus? In the first century, Ephesus was one of the grandest metropolises of the Roman Empire. a sprawling center of wealth and the seat of the colossal temple of Artemis. Yet, amidst the towering marble and the gilded splendor of the city, Mary did not choose to live in the heart of the crowds. She chose the solitude of a mountain cliff. High upon the slopes of Nightingale Mountain, far removed from the clamor of the marketplaces and the city's haze, she found refuge in a humble stone dwelling. There were no elaborate rituals here. There was only the wind whispering through the trees and the raw, ancient sounds of nature. The grit of the rough-hewn stone walls and her simple, hidden life stood in stark defiance of the sensual extravagance of the Roman world in the valley below. For centuries, the existence of this small house, known today as Mariam Ana Evi, remained buried beneath the dust of time. Incredibly, its ruins were only unearthed by archaeologists in the late 19th century, guided entirely by the mystical visions of a nun named Anne Catherine Emmerich, a woman who was bedridden and had never once set foot in the land of Turkey. In this secluded retreat, Mary required no magnificent cathedrals to commune with the divine. Through the quiet rhythms of her daily life, the drawing of water from a mountain spring, the slow, steady footsteps upon the dry earth, she found God in absolute stillness. This mountaintop home was more than just a safe haven. It was a sanctuary of the soul, delivering a powerful message across the ages, that true peace is found not in the world's noise, but in the quiet strength of the heart. The small stone dwelling perched upon Nightingale Mountain may have been secluded from the world's clamor, but it never isolated Mary from the heart of the early church. On the contrary, that quiet haven became a beacon of light, a spiritual bedrock. Before embarking on their perilous journeys to the ends of the earth, missions often marked by blood and sacrifice, the apostles would frequently make the pilgrimage to this mountain. They did not seek her out for commanding orders or grand strategies for church expansion. They came seeking a mother. In Mary, they encountered the profound power of the ministry of presence. She did not lead through authority, titles, or grand rhetoric. She led through the grace of compassionate listening. She was the sanctuary where men burdened with the mission of changing the world could finally rest their heads and find solace. Amidst the tempests of persecution and the fierce theological debates of those early years, Mary was the anchor that kept the apostles grounded in reality. She gently reminded them of the humanity of Jesus, of the infant who once needed the warmth of a manger, and the carpenter who once labored until he bled in Nazareth. It was through her quiet, nurturing influence that the deepest foundations of our faith, the understanding of a Savior who was fully and truly human, began to take shape. Though not a single sermon of hers was ever recorded, Mary's influence echoes through every page of the New Testament. And now, we step into the mystery of her final hours. A strange and wondrous event occurred at the end of her life, one that has been debated by the Eastern and Western churches for 2,000 years. What was it? And why is her tomb empty? The answer lies ahead, and it reveals the greatest hope for all of humanity. As her earthly years drew to a close, the history of our faith did not label Mary's departure as a mere death. Ancient tradition calls that moment by a name far more tender and profound: the Dormition, the falling asleep of the Mother of God. Why this subtle yet momentous distinction? To many, death carries the sting of cold finality, a brutal severing that leaves us trembling before the limits of our own existence. But Mary's final hour was painted in an entirely different light. Sacred tradition tells us that when that holy moment arrived, the apostles, who had been dispersed to the farthest reaches of the world, returned to gather at her bedside. In that quiet chamber, there were no desperate cries of despair. no frantic struggle against the inevitable. Surrounded by the sons of her faith who had weathered history's fiercest storms alongside her, Mary gently closed her eyes. This was not a broken body surrendering to defeat. It was a serene soul voluntarily drifting into a profound sleep, having perfectly fulfilled her mission on this earth. The way Mary entered her final rest unravels our most primal fear of mortality. It offers a breathtakingly peaceful perspective on the end, that passing is not a plunge into a dark abyss, but a quiet threshold, a peaceful closing of the eyes to step onto a new and eternal shore. Following that peaceful slumber, tradition tells us that Mary was laid to rest in a humble sepulchre at the foot of the Mount of Olives, nestled quietly near the Garden of Gethsemane. Yet, when the tomb was opened just a few days later, the apostles were met with a sight that shook them to their core. The tomb was entirely empty. Legend whispers that the only thing remaining was the sweet, lingering fragrance of lilies filling the air. The history of the early church is deeply intertwined with the preservation of sacred relics. The earthly remains of saints and martyrs were sought out, protected, and venerated at all costs. Yet, for the most significant woman in the history of faith, history records not a single fragment of bone, nor a solitary physical remain. For 2,000 years, no church in any corner of the world has been able to claim possession of her physical relics. Why this strange, profound absence? The answer is remarkably simple. Because there was nothing left to find. This empty tomb was no victim of grave robbery. It was the ultimate testament to the assumption. The moment she was taken, body and soul, into the eternal realm. This absence of her physical form did not leave behind a legacy of mourning, but rather a fulfilled promise. It stands as living proof that shatters doubt and bolsters humanity's faith in the life to come. From the humblest early believers to the most powerful Byzantine emperors, all have bowed in reverence at the places where her feet once trod. Majestic basilicas have been raised to encircle both the empty tomb in Jerusalem and that humble stone home in Ephesus. These monuments stand as eternal sentinels, reminding the world of a hope-filled truth. That death is not a final return to the dust, but a moment of total, glorious transcendence. The earthly pilgrimage of Mary has reached its end, but the legacy of those hidden years lives on forever. Reflect for a moment on the entirety of her path. A quiet mother in the twilight of her life remains every bit as vital and as great as the courageous young girl who once uttered her bold yes in Nazareth. She is the living embodiment of a powerful truth. Our purpose in life is never lost, nor does it wither with age. Instead, it gracefully transforms into something deeper, more resilient, and more profound. No matter which season of life you find yourself in, whether you are in the thick of a demanding career or entering the quiet, reflective years of your own twilight, Mary's story remains a beautiful reminder. It teaches us that a compassionate presence, steadfast patience, and sincere faith have the power to shape and move the world more enduringly than any loud proclamation ever could. Thank you for walking with us through these 30 minutes of faith and perseverance. If the story of Mary's hidden years has kindled a spark of hope or a sense of peace within you, please let me know in the comments below. Which tradition do you find more compelling? The legacy of Jerusalem or the sanctuary of Ephesus? I truly look forward to reading your thoughts. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join us as we continue to uncover the missing chapters of our history and faith. Share this video with someone you love as a gift of peace. May your day be filled with many blessings.